Roy sent something for us to look at. Or I should say, Jessica sent something to look at. I'm giving credit to the wrong Adams here. And of course, I'm talking about Roy and Jessica from Christ-Centered Ironworks right here on YouTube. And this is their Treadle hammer kit with air supply option. And so far, I have no idea what it's going to take to set this up. I think it's probably pretty straightforward. It's got all the mounting plates and hardware that you need. So I'm going to get all this stuff opened up, kind of take inventory of what the parts are. They sent some links for some videos on exactly how to put the thing together. So I may have to go watch some YouTube videos and see how this is assembled.
Okie doke, so there you have it. That is how I would assemble the treadle hammer.
Okay, I think that makes sense. I think we're ready to get started setting this up. This is really intended to go on a vertical 2x4, a stud that holds up your shop. My shop doesn't have any vertical 2x4s. Most of the supporting members are 6x6 posts, and none of those are readily accessible. They've all got so much stuff around them already. So I'm going to set this up just kind of temporarily. It's not going to be an ideal situation, but it'll give us a good chance to see how this thing performs, see what it's capable of, and see whether or not it's something you might like in your shop. Now, this is not a sponsored video. Roy and Jessica aren't paying me anything for this. They're not going to get to see the video or review it before it goes live. In fact, when I'm all done, because I don't have room for this, I'm going to take back apart and I'm going to send the kit back to them so that they can pass it on to somebody else. Maybe somebody else will get a chance to do a video about it. I'm just doing this as a chance to review the product, although there is an affiliate link down in the video description. And if you use that link, I might get a little bit of a kickback, get a little bit of beer money out of the deal. I thought about putting it right out here kind of in the middle of the shop, but I don't have a 2x4 long enough to go from floor to ceiling. And since it's not attached to a wall, it's going to have to be attached to the ceiling. So I'm going to stick it in the corner back here by the fly press. Be a little bit hard to set up, I think, but it'll be well attached to the ceiling. And then I can put a clamp of some sort on the fly press to make sure it stays stable. I've got this thing set up. I just want to reiterate, this is a very temporary mock-up, not a permanent solution to this kind of a setup. This is really kind of rickety. I think if I use this too much, I'd just tear this stud out of the screws. It's screwed to the ceiling, it's clamped to the fly press. It's an old dried out 2x4 that's probably ready to split and turn into kindling wood anyways. So if you're installing one of these in your shop, do a much better job setting this up, and you'll be a lot happier with it. But this is the only place I really had room to set it up just to try it out, so this is what we're going to do. And right now, it's just set up as a treadle hammer. I don't have the air lines all hooked up. I definitely think this would be better with my anvil setup going the other way. This is just what I had room for in this position, and that would give me a little better access to where the treadle is. Now, one thing I noticed with this right off is it's got a little bit of side-to-side play, and of course the longer your hammer handle is, the more play you're going to get in this. Now, Roy's instructions do include putting some shim washers in the mounting plates so you have more space for the hammer bracket. And I think that's something you probably need to fiddle with and adjust, add some, take some out until you get this fit just right. And that would take most of this out. And of course, mounting it to a more solid 2x4 would help too. Depending on how thick your sledgehammer handle is, that's going to change how far apart these plates are, and that's going to change the relationship with everything. So like anything else that you have to put together, it's going to need some adjustment, some fine tuning, some refinement. So I think if you take the time to do that, this will be a lot more precise than what I have set up right here. Now certainly you can hammer with it just like that. I'm going to put the air supply on there, and I think it's going to get a lot more convenient. Right now I have the air turned down to about 50 psi. I think I can turn it up, but not hitting real hard. So this is with the air turned up to 80 psi. That hits with a fair amount of force. Now when I set this up, I set it up so that the ideal strike of the hammer is with some top tooling in place. And that's really the way I would use this mostly. I don't think I'd use this for drawing out much, but you might. But for top tooling, it really comes in handy. And that's what I use my other treadle hammer for most of the time anyways. When you swing a hammer, whether it's by hand or on the pivot for the treadle hammer, initially the force is moving outward and it's going that way. But as you swing it, the force starts to move downward. If you go beyond that point, the force is moving backwards and it's going this direction. And the ideal place for a hammer to strike your work is right here. That's why I have this height adjusted so that that level swing, when all the force is going straight down, set up for tooling. It's never going to be perfect. It's always going to be a little too high or a little too low, but there is some adjustability with this. There are 3 positions. So if I were to move it down one position, the ideal strike point would be without any tooling in there. So depending on how you have this set up, you move it up a little bit, you move it down a little bit. You get a variety of options that way, and it makes the whole thing more useful. Then for the linkages for the treadle and for the spring, you just have to move it up or down a few chain links, and it should be pretty adaptable that way. I think I can probably turn the air up a little bit more. Now, if I were going to leave this set up permanently, there would be a lot of fine tuning, a lot of adjustment to do with this. But I think it's a good tool. I think it's got real potential. It's just going to take that fine tuning. It's going to take that adjustment. I don't like working on a full-size anvil with something like this. You may have noticed that sometimes I was striking right on the edge of the tool. That's because it's hard to tell exactly where this is going to come down. I would much rather have just a solid steel post under this that had a top surface about the size of the sledgehammer. Heck, you could probably even use a wooden stump and set a second sledgehammer head in the top of the wooden stump, and that way you'd have a perfect reference point, as long as you took the time to line them up and get them exactly in the same position. So whatever you're seeing in this video, if it looks a little funky, a little odd, remember, this is a temporary setup. I have not taken the time to fine-tune this. I think I'd probably work with this for a week, 2 weeks before I had everything adjusted just the way I wanted to, make sure the air pressure is right. I'd also go to a heavier sledgehammer. This is only an 8-pound sledge. I think Roy says this will go up to a 14, maybe even a 16-pound sledge. And that would be a much harder working tool. 8-pound sledge is kind of light. Now in my shop, I have an inline treadle hammer. It's a welded up treadle hammer. It has a 60-pound head, hits a lot harder. So they are completely different tools. Even though there's some crossover, they're never going to be exactly the same. And trying to compare this to that kind of a treadle hammer probably isn't a fair comparison either way. This is going to be a lot less expensive. If you buy a treadle hammer like mine ready to go, it's going to be 3 or 4 times the money of this with the air power unit. And the treadle hammer won't have an air power. It's all manual. So if your knees and your hips are wearing out and you can't stomp on a treadle hammer all day long, this air option really has some advantages. And for that matter, if you can't swing a hammer because your shoulders and your elbows are wearing out, the air option on this is going to allow you to do some work that you might not otherwise be able to do. And it's just a matter of getting everything fine-tuned and refined so that you know what to expect of the tool and get used to it, develop habits and techniques that suit this tool. Now, another thing I would do if I were going to set this up permanently is put an air regulator on the wall right next to it so that I can adjust the air pressure up and down as needed, depending on what kind of work I'm doing. I think that could make a big difference with the air supply on it. And certainly if I was going to put one of these in the shop, I would absolutely go with the air supply. I think that really makes this a pretty sweet tool. I think the current price is $700, and that includes everything but the sledgehammer, the anvil, and the air compressor. So you get all of the pre-cut brackets, all of the hardware to assemble it, spring, air cylinder, air pedal with air fitting on it, so you just plug it into your existing quick connect. Pretty simple setup. I think you could set this up initially in about an hour, hour and a half, and then spend some time over the next week or two doing all those fine-tuning things. I know I've mentioned that several times in this video, but I think that's really what it comes down to, is the fine-tuning. And once you get this dialed in, I think it'd be a pretty sweet tool to have in the shop. I'm a little disappointed I don't have room for it, but I am going to leave this set up, do a little bit of tweaking, and work with it some in the next week or two and try and get a few videos done. I've got a whole bunch of Roy's hooks that I thought I would do as Christmas gift ideas, so we're going to do the 6 Christmas themed hooks, and I think all of the chisel decorations I'm going to try and do under this hammer just to give it a good workout. But even though I'll work on those videos in the next week, they probably won't get posted until early December. I do hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next video.